Welcome back, everyone. I saw a bunch of other creators actually talk about the differences between their iPhone apps and their, Android apps as well. And I want to go and do the exact same thing and talk about my experience between both phones having these certain applications within them. Now, one thing I want to get out of the way is that we're probably looking at these stock Android apps and pretty much the apps you can download on the Play stores and App stores. But Android has a really cool advantage of being able to download and install APKs. So you are having sideload applications on the iPhone if you want to via Alt Store, but it's still super cool that you can go ahead and install your own applications via, downloading APK and installing it that way. That's a pretty big advantage of, Androids. But one thing I've always noticed is that when it comes down to certain applications, especially applications focusing around their cameras, there's a really big advantage for iPhones. It's almost like the iPhone cameras utilize the stock iPhone camera, or on Android, it almost looks like it's like taking a video of the camera. It's very, very strange. Speaking about the cameras though, almost kind of the same thing for a lot of the stock applications, things like camera applications, their phone call applications almost have the exact same thing as well. And even something like messages and text messaging and iMessaging kind of starting to look very similar as well. Again, not exactly the same thing, but there's definitely a lot of overlap when it comes down to both these phones. Now, one thing I do want to note is that when it comes down to their app stores, where you download all these applications, there's a lot of similarity here as well. I've always noticed that the Google Play Store loads up almost instantaneously. It's one of the fastest loading applications. And I do kind of like how the Google Play Store is. I've always liked the Google Play Store more than the App Store. For some reason, it just gives me a better vibe, and it just seems like there's a lot more going on, and I can see a lot more on the display at one time versus something like the App Store. It seems like it's just a bunch of advertisements on the App Store, whereas on something like the Google Play Store, it seems like it gives me a better experience overall, which is really nice, and it loads up extremely fast. Now, when it comes down to the actual applications of these things, I took a look at a few. I've been using Androids and iPhones for a long time, and the biggest application that most people use and most people compare is Snapchat. So if we take a look at Snapchat on an Android and on iPhone, immediately you can tell there's a lot of similarity, but this wasn't always the case. On Androids, it kind of was the last step that Snapchat would look at. They kind of looked at iPhones as number one and Androids as number two. Now they don't do that as much, but you can see slight things like a bigger hole, kind of like when the camera UI right there. The toggles at the bottom are the same, the top is almost the same. If you go and swipe down, you can get the exact same thing as well on both. And again, it wasn't always this case. It was a little bit different on both sides. Another thing is if you're actually recording videos on both, you kind of get the same thing too. You can zoom in, you can zoom out on both. And I do think it's gotten a little bit better in terms of the UI. I think it's gotten a lot better for Android. iPhones has pretty much stayed consistent, but I have noticed that I'm still getting a stable experience on my iPhone over my Android. So that is another thing I want to also note. Also, I don't get that abandoned thing on my Android, which is very strange. I've always gotten a much more stable experience on my iPhone over my Android. So that's probably another thing to keep in mind. Again, not a deal breaker. But it is one of those things to keep in mind. On top of that, I have noticed that applications like Instagram also are quite a bit different. So I feel like on Androids, I feel like I'm getting a little bit more of a choppier experience than on iPhones. And it's harder to kind of demonstrate this over the camera because I'm having both phones at the same time. I still kind of feel like on Androids, it's kind of a little bit different. It seems like it's faster, but I feel like iPhones have been kind of notoriously been giving me a smoother experience. But one thing that I do like about Androids that for some reason I don't have on my iPhone yet is actually the 120 hertz display. It seems like Instagram now has taken some pretty big updates, which is really cool. And it seems like it is accounting for the 120 hertz panel on Androids. It seems like iPhones still haven't really gotten it. So it seems like I'm getting a smoother experience on my iPhone, but a faster experience on my, Android device. So that's another thing I want to hit on. TikTok has done a great job at kind of making this most similar experience between both OSs. So that's a really good thing to see too. Again, because of the 120 hertz panel on the Samsung Galaxy S22, I kind of do feel like I'm getting a smoother, sensation, which is nice. And I do feel like it's faster overall too on the Android side. So again, it's not always apples to apples. Just because one app is faster on the iPhone doesn't mean it's going to be faster than the Android device every single time. And in this case, I would give the side to the Android. I feel like it's a little bit better, but still things like, when you go ahead and take a photo here, for example, photos and videos here, for example, I still kind of think like the iPhone gives me a smoother experience. I know it's hard to tell over the phone, but if I go and kind of like if I made a quick video, I would kind of get a better experience on the iPhone than on the Android. So that's another thing I kind of saw over time as well. So when it kind of comes down to it, what I can definitely tell you is something like the iPhones are still giving me, I think, a better app, just kind of better app experience. I feel like a lot of developers are still focusing around the iPhone with things like the App Store being improved and with the, constant updates that are being happening for a lot of different applications. I still like the way iPhones have been approached, and I still think over time this is probably the OS that most people are going to develop for, but it's not perfect. I feel like it's not as fast of an experience as Android's for a lot of applications, and I don't like the ability of not installing any applications that we want. I mean, we can always go to the App Store, but we don't have any other third-party way of installing apps here, even if they're perfectly fine apps. We have to wait until Apple approves them. And that's one thing I don't really like about iPhone apps. I like apps on iPhones for sure, but I just don't like having to get everything approved by Apple. It can get kind of annoying. Now, with something like on our Android side, as you guys probably have seen, we have the ability of installing other applications that we want to. For example, this Google Camera app, which doesn't really work for me, but having the ability to install it. If other people are using it on their phone, I don't see why I don't have the ability of installing it either. Now, we still have the Google Play Store, which I think is kind of superior to the App Store, to be honest, just in terms of the elements. I think the App Store is probably a little bit better in terms of security and everything, but having the ability of just having all this type of UI, and also we still have like our apps that are still like, the top charts. I don't think we have top charts on the App Store anymore, which is kind of strange. So we have that capability here. App updates and everything come side by side within one another, so there's not like one that's superior there either. And you still have kind of the same amount of applications between both. So it's not like, Androids or, Google Play Store. It's not like there's a big difference, I would say, in terms of the apps on them. The most of the applications I end up using are on both operating systems. So there's not really a pro or cons list there, but I do feel like with the, since Androids, there are so many Android phones out there, if a developer makes a, application for one Android phone, they have made it for all of them. On iPhones, on the other hand, when you make an app for an iPhone, you're not only making an app for a certain iPhone, but only maybe like 20 other iPhones that are supported on that iOS version. And Apple is kind of becoming a little bit more strict and making developers kind of update their operating system and their phones a little bit more. And they're making developers kind of update their apps a little bit more too. So it's totally up to you however you take it, but I still think there's advantages and disadvantages for both. And when it comes down to both applications, I don't think there's a direct winner here, to be honest. So that kind of covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.